Spider-Man universe is when former girlfriend Gwen Stacy dies. And however shocking or controversial this may seem, I proved it entirely by accident. If you want the story, I'll tell you, but we gotta go to the beginning, the very beginning. In 1920, my father was a dress cutter who didn't get that much work. So my family had to live through financial difficulties in a one-bedroom apartment. Now picture this. You have 4 people, 2 rowdy brothers, and a father who has to stay home, and he's kind of sad because he can't get work and support his family. That's a recipe for disaster right there. Now, even though we were attending difficulties, I attended the DeWitt Clinton High School and worked side jobs like writing obituaries for a press service or national releases for the National Tuberculosis Center and working as an office boy. Then in 1939, I went on to be hired as an office worker for Timely Comics, which was later known as Atlas Comics. Then in 1940, I became an interim editor. It was around this time, in World War II, that I worked as a playwright in the Signal Corps, writing training films, manuals, and slogans. Man, I love my slogans. Now, when I got back in the 1960s, my boss came to me and he said, "Hey, Stan, we need you to make," why am I giving you this accent? "Hey, Stan, we need you to make a comic series that can rival the DC Comics hit title, The Justice League of America." I said, "Okay, I'll do my best." And citing writing influences like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Jules Verne, and following encouragement of my wife Joan, I did away with some of the classic comic conventions. And with co-creator Jack Kirby, the Fantastic Four was born. It was a hit. In following the success of the Fantastic Four, I created more characters. You might have heard of them, such as Hulk, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Daredevil, and the X-Men. Have you heard of them?
Yes.
Then I was also known for many things, like imbuing my characters with a sense of humanism. Like Spider-Man, he has to combine his life as a superhero and his life as a teenage boy. He has a girlfriend, an aunt who's dealt with loss of his uncle. His uncle is gone, and his boss, J. Jonah Jameson, hates his other identity, Spider-Man. Spider-Man has to fight the Vulture, Mysterio. Like I said before, the sense of humanism. I was also known for tackling real-world issues in my comics, such as bigotry and drug use, which would influence comics for decades. Then I became producer and the editor for Atlas Comics, now known as Marvel Comics. Have you guys heard of them? Then I moved to West Coast to follow Marvel's film ventures, such as Iron Man and the Avengers. You guys have seen this movie, right? I hope so. Following that, I became the chairman emeritus, or the face of Marvel. I attended Comic Cons, college lectures, and panel discussions all around America. Then, in 2006, at the age of 83, I believe, I left Marvel. Now, you want to know the story about Gwen Stacy? I'll tell you. In a rush to get to Europe for a business trip, my editor, Roy Thomas, my writer, John Romita, and my illustrator, Jerry Conway, they all came to me with the idea, "Hey, what if we killed Gwen Stacy?" And the idiot I was, packing all of my things, I said, "Do whatever makes you happy. I gotta get to a plane." And what happened next shocked America, and then shocked Stan. Now, even though I've had amazing success all throughout my career, I've had problems such as the Gwen Stacy incident, we're just going to call it that, and any other mishap that I might have had. I can't name them all, there's too many. So You should always remember that comics are like storytelling. It's like novels or anything else. The first thing you have to do is become a good storyteller. Now, speaking of planes, I have to get to a plane. So before I go, do any of you have any questions?
They say we massacred him, but he would have done so to us if we had not defended ourselves and fought to the last. We did not ask you white men to come here, for the Great Spirit gave us this land as a home. You had yours. We did not want to interfere with you. We do not want your civilization. For one does not sow the earth upon which people walk. I am Crazy Horse, a chief of the Lakota. As a child, I was known as Curly before I was given the same name as my father. His horse is Creamy. As a boy, my friends and I would watch and admire the warriors as they would ride off into battle. One day, they allowed me to come to guard the horses from wild animals and other tribes. That same day, someone snuck into our camp. I shot and killed him with my bow. I left to retrieve the scalp, but I realized I had killed a woman. Now, in our culture, there's nothing wrong with killing a woman as long as you have a good reason. But still, I refused to take the scalp. For this, I was called Curly Don't Life. When I became a young man, my chief was shot by the white men. I was so traumatized by this event, I left home to have my vision. A vision changes the life of a warrior, and my vision changed my life. What I saw was a warrior riding through a wave of white hands without being touched. He told me not to be greedy or to take anything for myself, and while he was riding away, hands from my own tribe pulled him off of his horse. When I returned home, at first my father was mad at me for leaving without the proper preparation, but then he was proud. He told me that if I followed the warrior's instructions and never took anything for myself, that warrior would be me, and I would not be harmed in battle. For my deeds in battle, the elders gave me the honor of being a shirt wearer, but this means I was a member of the council. But I lost this honor when I chose to run away with Black Buffalo, a woman who was married to no water. Now, in our culture, a woman may divorce her husband by moving out of his tent and into another. But still, no water was jealous. He tracked us down and shot me in the face. To settle our dispute, no water had to give me 3 horses, and I got to stay with Black Buffalo Woman. But I lost my honor of being a shirt wearer. The white men have started coming through our villages. This started without conflict, but then they shot at us, so we shot back. And then they built a fort on our land. This caused difficulties. They were trying to get us to move off our land and into reservations. Only one chief agreed. He tried to get the rest of us to move in with him. I refused. I refused to leave my home, where I live. Last summer, I participated in a great battle with a white army regiment led by General George Custer. I was not able to be afraid, riding into battle with bullets flying around me, calling to my warriors, saying, "Hook ahead, today is a good day to die." Every white soldier on that field, including General George Custer, was killed. I do not mourn their loss. Now, knowing there are many white men out there, and no matter how many we kill, there will always be more to take their place. The fate between our 2 communities will be seen by one man with one vision. And when he has this vision, he must follow it, as an eagle seeks the deepest blue of the sky. Now, does anyone have any questions?
Over many thousands of years, every species has evolved, adapting to better fit its environment, just as over time a man evolves, learning and getting better at learning as he grows older. When I was very young and had learned very little, I would wander my family's estate in Shrewsbury, collecting every different kind of rock on the pathway up to the house, finding beetles and bugs, and going on walks with my father. But my happy fantasy of life was shattered when I was 9. My mother died. The next year, I was sent off to Shrewsbury Grammar School. It was terrible. The older boys carried around loaded guns. The food was terrible, and beatings were frequent. Sometimes I would sneak away, hiding in the backyard shed of our home and doing chemistry experiments with my brother Raz. We had great times, but when I was 13, Raz was sent away to a different school, and I was stuck spending 3 long, lonely years at Shrewsbury. Eventually, my father realized how badly I was faring there, and he pulled Raz and I both out of school and sent us off to Edinburgh to become doctors. After my first year at Edinburgh, I learned one thing. I didn't want to be a doctor. But not wanting to upset my father, I went back the next year. After my second year at Edinburgh, I decided I didn't want to go there anymore and approached him one night. Father, I don't want to go to Edinburgh anymore. I don't want to become a doctor. He was furious. What do you mean you don't want to become a doctor, Charles? What do you want to do with your life? Hunt and play and sport? You're a disgrace to the Darwin name. Discouraged by my father's words, this was one of the low points of my life. Eventually, my father did let me quit Edinburgh, but if I wasn't going to be a doctor, then I was going to be a clergyman. So the next year, I was sent off to Cambridge to study theology. These years at Cambridge were some of my happiest. Not long into the first year, I took up beetle collecting. I became obsessed with it, really obsessed. I remember one day, I was walking along, my collecting tin in my left hand. I walked up to a tree, set the tin down, and ripped off a strip of bark. Nothing. I walked over to the next tree, ripped off a strip of bark. Still, nothing. I did this for 2 or 3 more trees, till on the 5th tree, I walked up, ripped off a strip of bark, and there in front of me were 2 rare black beetles. I took one in each hand and turned to return to my collecting tin at the first tree. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a 3rd black dot. I turned, and there, another rare specimen. I couldn't bear to lose it. I looked at the beetle in my right hand, then at the beetle in my left, and then an idea went from my head to my hands faster than I could think. I popped the beetle in my right hand into my mouth and reached out and grabbed the 3rd beetle off the tree. Then, a terrible taste filled my mouth. I spit out the beetle in my mouth, dropped the beetle in my right hand, and ran back to the tree, the first tree. I put the beetle in my collecting tin and then returned to the 5th tree. I looked around, but in the end, I returned home with 1 beetle and a terrible taste in my mouth. At Cambridge, I met a man named John Henslow, the botany professor. We became good friends, and one summer, I received a letter from him when I was coming home from a hunting trip. Dear Charles, I was wondering if you would like to take the position of unpaid naturalist upon the HMS Beagle. It will be leaving in November. It will go to South America to do mapping, circle around the world, and then return to Europe. In total, a 2-year trip. I sent my answer back immediately, which was totally, unwaveringly, absolutely yes. The trip was delayed by 2 months because of weather, but in December of 1831, we were off. And as soon as we left, I was plagued by terrible seasickness. For the rest of the trip, I would feel this way whenever we were on water. In fact, by the time we reached our first port, I was afraid I would have to get off. But then, nature kicked in. The breeze, the beach, the butterflies, it was all so amazing. And so I decided I could to stick through it. It was worth it. Of the many great things that happened on the long voyage of the Beagle, there was one that will stay in my mind forever. The Galapagos Islands. They were amazing. As soon as we stepped off the boat, it was like walking into a brand new alien island. I collected bird specimens and kept them in my already cluttered room, preparing to study them when we got back home. But one of the most interesting things on the Galapagos were the tortoises. After a bit of studying, I realized that the tortoises from the different islands had different shells. Could it be that each island had a specific environment that the turtles adapted to on that specific island because they couldn't interbreed with the turtles from the other islands? This was where my theory, the one that I came to talk to you about today, really started forming. Eventually, we had to leave the Galapagos. I was disappointed, but we went under the Horn of Africa, returned to South America to do a bit more mapping, and then finally returned to Europe. I was relieved. The originally planned 2-year trip had taken 5. I moved in next to my brother Raz in London and quickly sent in my bird specimens to professionals. The results were strange, to say the least. There were 15 different species of finches just from the Galapagos. Could it be that just like the turtles, the finches had evolved to fit the specific environment of their island? My theory came together even more. And then I read Tom Malthus's essay. He said that a species will create too many of one generation, and then only the strongest will be able to survive and reproduce. My theory came together. The pieces were forming. And then I married my childhood friend, Emma. And a couple of years later, our family had grown too large for our home in London, and so we had to move to the Down estate. It reminded me of my home in Shrewsbury, and that's why we decided to live there. I spent the next couple of years studying my theory, forming it, creating it, writing down wherever I was in small notebooks. And then I got bored, and I decided I didn't want to study the origin of species anymore. I wanted to go do something else. So for the next 8 years, I studied barnacles. I wrote 4 volumes on them, actually, if you'd like to check them out. But then my dear daughter Anne died. It was tragic, and her death haunts me to this day. But it got me back to work. I continued on the origin of species. I worked on it day and night. Eventually, I was close to finishing it. My friends urged me to publish it, but I said no. It must be perfect. Then I received a letter from a man named Russell Wallace. He said that he had combined the works of Malthus and Lyell to create a theory. He said that a species, an individual, will be born with a mutation, and if that mutation is beneficial, then it shall be passed on to the next generation, spreading through the species or creating a new species. I had been working on this theory for the past 20 years, and this man had just asked me to help him publish the same thing. I was furious with myself for not publishing sooner, furious with him for figuring it out, but his needs came before mine, and I agreed to help him publish. But before I could, my friends, Lyell and Hooker, convinced me that I should present with him to the Linnaean Society. So we did. I started working more than ever, all the time, never even taking a break, trying to finish my book, getting it perfect like I had always wanted it to be. And then it was done. 20 years of work, wrapped up like that. And so I sent it out there, published it, and it was a hit. It sold 1,250 copies on the first day. There was some controversy, but the backup of my friends My friends in the science world, such as Lyell, helped get through the controversy to help it become more popular, the theory become more popular. I'm not much of a people person, and I would like to return home now, but before I go, are there any questions?
There's only attack, attack, and more attack. I've carried this motto without me throughout my entire life, through every victory I've had. In fact, I was born into it. I was born in San Gabriel, California, on November 11th, 1885. And as I was growing up, I heard many stories over my ancestors. And one thing I learned about my ancestors was that I had a long line of military history. Many of these great guys who had gone into battle and had many stories to tell. For instance, both my great-uncle and great-grandfather had fought in the Civil War, where they had both died. Hearing all these stories about my heritage in the military, I knew from an early age that I was going to join the military as soon as I could. I was destined for greatness. So as soon as I had gotten out of high school, my first act was to go and join the Army. My first assignment with the Army was to go down south and become a part of the Board Patrol. Now, the Board Patrol was very boring. Same scenery over and over and over. And it was barely the greatness that I had imagined when I was little. But one thing had happened while I was down there. A man by the name of Pancho Villa came up and rode into the United States and raided the town of Columbus, New Mexico. The president was furious about the news of this, so he sent a detachment of the army down south to go and capture Pancho Villa, dead or alive. However, I would not be going along with this mission. When I heard about this, I went over to General John Pershing, and I told him what was right. I told him that this was wrong, and I convinced him to let him take me along as his aide. When we went down south, I still was not seeing much excitement. So I asked him again, and I convinced him to give me a detachment of cavalry to command. And I did great things with this cavalry. We met with Julio Cardenas, one of Pancho Villa's right-hand man, and we killed him. We got rid of him for the United States. But the raid into Mexico was short-lived, and we weren't able to find him. But the excitement was not yet over. In Europe, World War I was brewing. It had been brewing for many years. And the United States had finally gotten its chance to get involved. So I went over with Pershing as his aide once again, and I fought over there. But the war was short. I didn't get to see many battles. I just sort of sat behind in the sidelines watching as the Germans were pushed back into Germany and soon surrendered. I still wanted to stick with the army, so I continued on for the many years afterwards. But once again, it seemed that Germany had not yet had its fill of war. Over in Europe, while I was still in the military, they had begun their quest for more land, invading many of their neighbors, and it had started yet another war. But the United States would not yet join. But the President, Roosevelt, had us get ready to mobilize in case there was anything that we needed to do, in case we had to go to war, for whatever reason. So I was promoted up 2 ranks. And then the day came. Japan launched an attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, and we are once again at war. My first act was to go over into North Africa, where there were many of the Vichy France army, and they had occupied a little bit south of Spain and Morocco. We quickly kicked them out, and because of the reputation I had gained there, I was redeployed down into more of the eastern part of Africa. The reason for this was our army was not doing very well there. And when I arrived over there, I could see why. It was the most disorganized bunch I had ever seen. And so when I became general of the 3rd Army over in North Africa, I quickly whipped them into shape. And it had worked. For many months, our army just suffered defeat after defeat. But I took charge, and I got them ready for battle. And we finally were beginning to push back the Germans. It was very difficult. The man behind the Germans was a man by the name of Erwin Rommel. He was called the Desert Fox. He was almost as good as a commander as I was, almost. And so we eventually prevailed, and we pushed them into Italy. And we finally began our final push northward. We started off with the island of Sicily, and once we had captured the island, we finally began our push towards Italy, which then they quickly fell. But I was not quite done yet. Neither was the war. The commanding general, Eisenhower, had assigned me to go over into western France, where I wouldn't see much of the fighting, but he did tell me that I did have an important job, and that was to create a diversion. So what we did was that we had all these inflatable tanks and this fake army set up, and I would command them. Because of my reputation, the Germans would think that was where the real invasion was going to happen. And this ended up actually working. They sent a small little army to go and face us, and it took off the pressure of the main invasion, which happened in Normandy on June 6th. Once the invasion had finally happened, the Germans were on the run. But they weren't quite done yet. In their act of desperation, they tried to push our lines. And in doing so, they surrounded one of our groups, the 101st Airborne, who had done very well on the invasion of D-Day. So I took my army, and I went in there, and I rescued them. And by then, the German attack had failed. We quickly understood what they were doing. We quickly pushed them back with each successive attack. And as quickly as their battle had happened, the Germans finally surrendered. And we pushed into Germany, and the war was over. Yet, Europe was in ruins, so they had me stay behind in order to help clean up and oversee the rebuilding and denazification of Germany. But it was in this that Eisenhower fired me for some of the things I said. Apparently, he just wasn't as smart as I thought. So I'm just sitting here in Europe, hoping to see if I can't find any other jobs I can pick up with, and see if I can't receive my title back as general. But I must be going soon. Are there any questions?
Carry out random acts of kindness with no expectation of reward, safe in the knowledge that someone might do the same for you. That was always my logic, being a person and a princess. I don't go by the rule book. I lead by the heart, not the head. And that's what I've always hoped to teach people, especially my own children, William and Harry. I'm a mother and then a princess. I became a princess July 29, 1981, wife to Prince Charles of Wales. I was only 16 at our first meeting. Prior to that, he was dating my older sister, Sarah. Only after a few years, we started our relationship, and then he proposed to me. I said yes, because at the time, I thought we were in true love. But his true love was actually Camilla Parker Bowles. But at the time, I didn't know that, so of course I said yes. He proposed to me with a beautiful diamond sapphire ring. That day will be remembered forever. Our wedding was known to be a fairy tale wedding. I remember having to practice walking in the veil because it was 25 feet long. And if I didn't practice, I could have tripped while walking down the aisle. Over 750 million people were known to watch from around the world. Only the next summer in 1982, we had our first son, William. And then 2 summers later, we had Harry. My boys are the light of my life. I tend to have them grow up in a more informal way. That meaning, I will take them to school myself instead of having the nannies take them. Take them to different events, parks, amusement parks as well. I want them to know that there is more beyond the palace walls, which is something I should have thought of before marrying Charles. But of course I didn't at the time. Being a part of the royal family means attending different events. Like in 1985, I was invited to Great Britain's first AIDS Medlex Hospital, where I was pictured shaking the hand of an HIV-positive patient. No protection, no gloves, nothing. One of my fondest memories. Because that picture was known to change the perspective on how HIV and AIDS is spread from person to person. I still go bedsides to different charities and hospitals and make bedside visits with the patients. Also in 1985, I was invited by First Lady Nancy Reagan to the White House, where I got to dance with John Travolta. I was wearing a beautiful blue velvet dress, which is now known as the Travolta dress. I also love to go help out with different charities, like the homeless shelters. I like knowing that I'm helping the youth find jobs, food, and shelter. I'll even bring my sons with me along to help there. I guess charities is one thing that I will and always will love, which is probably why I'm connected to over 100 different charities. Now, Charles and I are not faithful to our marriage, which is another reason why I love charities, because of the time it takes away from Charles and I. We are not faithful. We do not love each other the way a wife and husband should, which is why in 1992, we separated. Not divorced, just separated. I needed time to myself, time to think, because our marriage with me and him was more of a convenience for him, because his parents pressured him into marrying me, because his mother and his father, Queen Elizabeth, she saw me to be a proper and suitable fit for the royal family. Well, I don't know if she still thinks that, but who will know? And the paparazzi. Having people follow you everywhere you go, taking photographs, asking and yelling what's going to happen next, it gets overwhelming. It gets uncomfortable. Sometimes you don't even want to go outside because of them. It's as if they always have something to watch you do, something, you just take one step and it's going to be photographed, because as a lot of you may know, I am the most photographed woman currently. So it makes it overwhelming to go different places. But I cannot let them take over my time with you. Before I go, I have a few thoughts and comments to share. I am like a free spirit. Some don't like that about me, but that's who I am. So when I have to go by certain rules, it's hard for me. I like to go by my own rules. And, of course, I'm not like a typical princess. But having little girls look up to you, and having children in general waiting for your help is amazing, because children will always have a special place in my heart. Family is the most important thing in the world. So when I had my own, it was amazing. Now before I go, do you have any thoughts or comments to stick with me?
Congratulated for these accomplishments. It's the people who took the chance, who dedicated themselves to coming back to school. They're the ones who deserve your admiration, not me. I just gave them the opportunity. Good afternoon. My name is Emily Griffith. It is the year 1918, and you all have invited me here to talk about the Opportunity School. But I would like to talk about how I got the idea in the first place. I was born in 1868 on February 10th in Cincinnati, Ohio. My early years of life were very difficult. Now why, you ask? because my father was an honest lawyer. He only fought for people who he believed were telling the truth, which unfortunately for my family and I was not very many. This caused him to have many different jobs because he wasn't good at them, and my family and I to move around a lot. My education was constantly interrupted. When I was a child, my uncle was a barge operator in the daytime and a teacher at night. There was a sign on his barge that read, "For all who wish to learn," and those words stuck with me. In 1884, me and my family moved to Nebraska. I was interviewed by 3 men in a sod house to be a teacher. First they said, "She's too young and pretty to be a teacher." I thought how wrong they were. Then they asked me to read out loud, so I did. Then the 3 men asked me to spell vicissitudes, Vissitudes, which means changes. One of the men said, "I don't like the way you write your letter S." So I changed the way I wrote it, and they accepted me to teach at the sod house in Nebraska. Back then, Nebraska didn't have many cities or any hotels for me to stay in, so I lived with my students and their families. And sometimes at night, my students would ask me to read a passage from the Bible or pages from a book because their parents could not read or do simple math. And this gave me an idea. What if there was a school where there was no age limit, no time limit? You can learn whatever you thought that would make your life better. In 1848, my family and I moved to Denver. I was the only one who worked because my older brother Peter stayed in Nebraska because he got married. Once again, I was a teacher. I taught my students in the morning and their parents at night. Then, in 1916, we opened the Opportunity School. It was for all people of all ages, and we held morning through night classes for everyone to learn. We taught them things like math and reading, and education for jobs like a cook. We also had to change the curriculum because there was World War I coming up. We taught them how to fix the trucks for the field and be medics for the injured. And there was one problem at the Opportunity School. My students with jobs, as in the parents, never really got to eat, and they came to Opportunity whenever they had the chance. So they started to get nauseous every day. So my mother and mentally disabled sister, they made soup and brought it on the trolley for my students to eat. Well, it was my pleasure meeting you this afternoon, and although I would love to stay and continue chatting, I have to get back to teaching. But before I leave, does anyone have any questions?
Darkness. Cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Hello, and I am Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When I was 5 in 1934, I had a friend, and we would play every day. One day, I walked up to his house, all excited, ready to play. I knocked on the door, and his father opened and gave me a disapproving look. I asked, "Can I play with my friend?" He told me, "No, because you're a Negro, you're going to a Negro school. My son is white, and he's going to a white school." And whoosh, slammed the door in my face. I didn't know what to think. I ran home crying, and I told my parents what happened. My mother said, "Martin, you're as good as everyone else. Just remember that." Then I started noticing things. Why only water fountains, colored water fountains? Why only restaurants, colored restaurants? And on a bus, a white section and a black section. These were all part of the Jim Crow laws, which means things separate but equal, when it really wasn't equal. And matter of fact, when I was in high school, I rode the city bus with my professor. We paid our fare, we sat down, all the other seats were filled, but white people kept on coming on. the bus driver told us, "Boys, get to the back!" And we had to stand at the back of the bus for 90 minutes straight. I will never forget that moment. When I was 15, I graduated high school and went to Morehouse to start college. I read an essay by Henry David Thoreau called Civil Disobedience, where I learned to refuse to cooperate with such an evil system. I also read about Mahatma Gandhi, where he believed in peaceful protest and used them to save India from the British. So, I started taking these thoughts and my Christian upbringing to fight back, to start the Civil Rights Act. And December 1955 was my chance. I started Boston University, where I met Coretta, which we moved to Montgomery, Alabama, and had our first child, Yolanda. I was a minister at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. And December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks was fined and arrested for not giving up her seat for a white man and disobeyed a police officer. That's when the NAACP, or the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, wanted to use Rosa's case to fight back, which was when they invited me to help lead the Montgomery bus boycott. We paid the same fare, but we were treated differently. We had to get off the bus, go around, go onto the back doors to get to our section, because we couldn't go through the white section. We had to give our the first few rows of the black section. White people can go too. And the people in that section would have to get up their seats and go stand at the back. So, we gathered the community and we asked, "Are you treated differently even though we paid the same fare?" Well, we learned it's better to walk in dignity than ride in humiliation. So let's not ride the buses. We walked, we rode our bikes, we took cabs. People that had cars gave free rides, but we did not step a foot on the city bus. We were hoping that the Montgomery would lose too much money where they could not pay the bus drivers, or they would have to break that rule, which eventually it did. This lasted for a year. Between December 1st in 1955 and December 21st, 1956, and a lot of violence happened in that year. My house was even bombed with my wife and child inside. Luckily, they survived. Then, the case was taken to Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court ruled that there would be no segregation on Montgomery buses because it's against the Constitution. Now that was our first victory. Then we aimed for the restaurants, which was really nice, and we did sit-ins and white-only restaurants. We were refuse-serviced, we got dumped hot foods all over us, and were arrested. We kept going on because we were still making progress. In 1963, the NAACP held a March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom because we were giving bad jobs. We didn't get the same amount of wages just because we're a different color skin. We did not have a lot of freedom because we're a different color of skin. So we led the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where I gave the I Had a Dream speech in front of the Lincoln Memorial and 500,000 people, white and colored. I explained, I have a dream where my 4 little children will live in a nation where they're judged by the content of their character and not by the content of their skin. A year later after that, in 1964, I won the Nobel Peace Prize. I was the youngest man to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And there are a lot of emotions combined with that. Amazement, pride, confidence, happiness, determination. And that same year, Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. That was 4 years ago. Even though our mission has completed, we still have a lot of progress to make. The Vietnam War is still going on, and I'm in Memphis, Tennessee, protesting to get sanitation workers more wages. But I remember one thing. The time is always right to do what's right. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to go to the balcony to get some fresh air. But before I do, any questions?
I do not so much rejoice that God hath made me to be a queen over so thankful a people. Here we are in the country of England, the year 1590, and I'd like to thank you all for coming to listen to the great stories of my life. I'm Elizabeth, Queen of England, daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. I was once told that my father wanted a son so badly he was thrilled when all the fortune tellers told him that my mother was going to give him a son. He scheduled a huge celebration. But when my mother was going into labor, he was pacing outside the room door, waiting and wondering and waiting, when suddenly the nurse came out saying, "The baby is born." My father rushed in saying, "Is it a boy?" My mother responded with, "No, it's a healthy baby girl." Oh, and he canceled the celebration. As the queen, it makes me saddened that my father would not celebrate my birth because I am a woman. But that knowledge only makes me stronger, and I know that I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king. I often wonder what would have happened if I had been a boy. The celebration would have been canceled. My father would not be disappointed. And most of all, my mother, maybe, just maybe, would still be here with me. When I was only 2 years and 8 months old, my father, who chose to have nothing to do with my mother, went so far to divorce and then beheading my dear mother. But all my wondering is for nothing, because the past cannot be cured. When I turned the age of 25, I became Queen Elizabeth I. Before that, my half-brother Edward and later my half-sister Mary both ruled as the English monarchs, but both their reigns were short-lived. Mary violently tried to turn back the Protestant forms that began when my father started the Church of England. But I returned the Church to its rightful place as the official religion of our country. It broke my heart that I was forced to order the death of my cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots. She was the daughter of my father's oldest sister, and I loved her dearly. But she married poorly and was caught up in plots to overthrow my reign. I kept her here in prison in England for many years to save her life, but it became too much when the Catholics rose up and encouraged them to kill me and let Mary become a Catholic queen who would bow to the will of the Pope. I had to order her execution. I keep my friends close, but my enemies even closer. Sometimes it is hard to tell the difference. I have ruled reigning England as a female monarch has not been an easy task, but one that I'm committed to. I have the heart of a man, not a woman, and I'm not afraid of anything. I have suffered from smallpox, from plots of insurrection, and from endless criticism over my decision not to marry and bear an heir to succeed me. Though the sex to which I belong to is considered weak, you will nevertheless find me the rock that bends no wind. I have ruled as your country's queen for over 40 years, and I hope to sit on this throne for many more. Though I have suffered greatly in my lifetime, I have much to be grateful for. He who placed me on this seat will keep me there, and I am eternally proud to be your queen. Does anyone have any questions?
Faith is a fine invention for gentlemen who see, but microscopes are prudent in an emergency. Have you really found faith? Oh, Vinny, my dear sister, how can you say you trust God? There is no science to prove it. If it can't be proven with facts, how can it be true? I cannot believe in it. I refuse to stand up in church and say I wish to be saved, and I will not fake my faith. I am one of the lingering bad ones. I spend my days writing poetry, and doing science. So I believe that anything true can be proven by looking through a microscope or doing research. I do not know how you trust God. Yes, I believe that the good things of this world come from God. Yes, it is He who puts the halo over the head of the good man, but isn't it also He who causes the eyes of the bad man to lower to the ground like an ashamed dog? Still, I believe you trust in God as well as this faith you have found. And at times, I have to admit, I think I envy you, and all the others, Vinny, our entire family. I think I envy your ability to put your fate in hands other than your own. When we were growing up, I had to take my fate into my own hands. I spent day after day looking out the window at the graveyard, becoming more and more acquainted with death. This caused troubling thoughts with me, and I had to put my fate in my own hands, and I could choose to let these thoughts drive me insane, or I could find a way to channel them. I did this by writing poetry. I put my emotions into my writing. This became a habit, and I did the same thing when war broke out after South Carolina seceded. I wrote many poems about the war, and this is one of them. It feels a shame to be alive when men so brave are dead. One envies the distinguished dust permitted such a head. The stone that tells defending whom the Spartan put away, what little of him we possess in pawn for liberty. The price is great, sublimely paid. Do we deserve a thing that lives like dollars must be piled before we may obtain? Are we that wait sufficient worth at such enormous peril as life dissolved for us in battle horrible? It may be a renown to live. I think the man who died, those unsustained saviors, present divinity. This war is going on, and my friend, Mr. Thomas Higginson, is fighting in it. He commands a regiment. I remember just last year, I sent Mr. Higginson 2 of my poems, along with a letter. This letter. Mr. Higginson, are you too deeply occupied to say if my verse is alive? The mind is so near itself, it cannot see distinctly, and I have none to ask. Should you think it breathed and had the leisure to tell me, I should feel quick gratitude. Oh, Vinny, if you believe my words to be alive, would you share these thoughts with me? I wish my words to be alive. I want my poetry to have a soul and carry breath. And I wonder, if the world were to ever read my poems, would they think my words to be alive? Now I apologize, because I have to get back to class. I fear I'll be late. But before I go, does anyone have any questions?
Oh, beautiful, for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain. Do you know that song? I wrote it. Hello there. My name is Catherine Lee Bates. You might recognize my name because I wrote one of the most famous poems in American history. It's called America the Beautiful. Do you want to know the story on how I wrote my amazing poem? Yes. Well, I was an English professor at Wellesley College when I was invited to teach summer classes at Colorado College in Colorado Springs. When I wasn't teaching, I was exploring. In fact, on my last week in Colorado, some other professors and I decided we'd go up to Pikes Peak. During our long wagon ride, I saw the tallest trees I've ever seen. When we finally got to the top, boy, was it beautiful. The clear blue spacious skies, the fresh mountain air, it was so beautiful, I decided to write a poem. Oh, beautiful, poor spacious skies. That was the beginning of what would soon be a world-famous poem. Unfortunately, due to altitude sickness, some of the other professors were getting really sick, and we had to go down early. During our way back, I finished my poem. I reread it and hated it. Yes, hated it. So I decided I'd just keep it in my journal as if it were some old boring thing. my poem, reread it, and I actually kind of liked it. So I had it published in a magazine called The Congregationalists. A man named Samuel Ward read my poem and sent me a letter saying, "Miss Bates, I would like to put your poem into my music." So we met up. From that point on, we decided we were going to work very hard to put my poem into his music. When we were finally done, the result was lovely. Now, I used to just be an English professor at Wellesley College in Massachusetts. But now, I'm the head of the whole English department. This is a great accomplishment for me, especially since I was a student there. I love working with all these wonderful girls because they bring back so much memories of when I was a student there. Now, would you like to sing part of my song with me?
Yes.
Let's start at America. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Thank you. Now, does anybody have any questions?
Hi there. I'm going to tell you a story that really affected my life. When I was in high school, 18 or 19 back then, me and my boyfriend Alejandro were riding on the trolley in Mexico City. There was a streetcar right next to the trolley. The street was not wide enough for the trolley that I was in and the streetcar. And suddenly, crash, boom, boom, the streetcar and the trolley crashed. 9 people died. I was very injured. The steel handle impaled me through the hip. My pelvis and spine were fractured. At that time, I wanted to become a doctor badly. Because of that, I couldn't. I had to stay in the Red Cross hospital for several weeks. After I returned to the Casa Azul, my beloved home, I had to wear a full body cast for 3 whole months. It was very tiring and painful. Since my father was a part-time painter and I was in bed a lot because of the body cast, my mom gave me an easel so I could paint. Put a mirror over my head so I could see myself. I painted myself since I was mostly lonely and I also knew me best. I love painting my eyebrows. In fact, most of my paintings are self-portraits. Then I got married to famous painter Diego Rivera. I first met Diego when I was in high school. I was in the group called Red Caps. We always wore caps. We liked to play tricks on Diego. Diego used my school to paint murals. He was twice my age. When I grew older, I showed Diego some of my paintings. Diego soon became my art teacher. Soon after that, we fell in a romantic relationship and we got married. I wanted to have kids, but because of accident, I did. We moved to America in New York for Diego's work at the Museum of Modern Art. Diego was the house in America. There were 2 parts. There was a bridge that connected them that also separated. I worked on one side, Diego stayed on the other. I was always taking care of Diego and traveling. I didn't have any time to paint. That's when I painted for my guest paintings. It represents on one side American pollution and the other side Mexican culture. Finally, we came back to Mexico. I was so happy. I wasn't really happy in America. I'm going to tell you a story about my childhood. It also leads to now why I wear a lot of Mexican jewelry and dresses. When I was 5 years old, I had polio. My leg got super thin. My parents made me do bicycle riding, swimming, soccer, running, and even boxing, but my leg never got better. The people in my neighborhood called me Vita Peddler. So I always wear a special sock and long dresses to cover my leg. Anyhow, so when we came back to Mexico, I was super happy. My marriage with Diego was not usual. People called us elephant and dove. Me and Diego separated a few times, but we always got back together. There have been 2 great accidents in our life. Troy and Diego. Diego was by far the worst. Before her dying, I hope Diego would live your life. Vida la vida. And before I leave, do you have any questions?
Hi everybody. Thank you for coming today to watch me. Now, I hope you guys weren't expecting a concert because I'm not providing that. Sorry. I think I'm just gonna kind of tell you about my life. Let's begin. Now, imagine this. It was the 80s. This was a big year for me. At about this time, my nose started to turn white. I went to the doctor and asked him, "Doctor, what's wrong with my nose?" He told me he had Pelongo. It's a rare disease. This is a Pelongo. I never heard of such a thing. What would it do to me? I found out that Pelongo can make your skin white or whiter. Now, since I was black, I become white. Rumors were spreading that I bleached my skin because I hated my race. These rumors are disgraceful and a bunch of lies, but I didn't let them get to my head. That same year, I came out with some of the most inspiring songs, such as Beat It, Billie Jean, Man in the Mirror, I think you all heard this one, Thriller. After that, I realized my skin was part of who I was. Nobody could tell me who I was. And people started to realize it didn't matter if you're black or white. It's about your commitment and your hard effort. And that is just what I showed my fans. Now, in my early years, you might have saw me doing the Jackson 5 and my 4, Really Soft Rollers. Now, this was so much fun for me. We did so many hit songs, like ABC and a whole bunch of others. Now, the stage felt like home to me. It truly did. But sometimes after performances, the stage didn't really feel like home. Things happened there with my dad. I almost quit singing because of it. Now, my mom helped me continue on it because she believed in me, and so did my brothers. So I went solo career. Now, I owe my mom everything, right? And so I told her, "Hey, I owed you." And one day, she saw Jehovah's Witness going door to door and handing out flyers. So my mom's really religious. She told me and Latoya to do the same thing. But we had a problem. I'm too famous, people. You guys would chase me down the street for an autograph. So what we did, got on some new hats and some new mustaches. And we went door to door, same way. It was so much fun, but I'm telling you, once you take off a mustache, oh my God, it burns. It's not funny. So, this story's about my hair. So one day I was at the Pepsi Center, moving. Then all of a sudden this dude lit my hair on fire with a firework. I was in the hospital for months. I'm telling you, kind of put in a pony and put that flame-proof hat on. Now, I never really got childhood. I couldn't go play in the mud, get a scrape on my knee. I had to be Mr. Perfect for my dad. Kind of made up for that with Neverland Ranch. This ranch was a party every day for me. My kids, my little girl, my 2 little boys, they had so much fun playing there. Me and my chimpanzee Bobo shot a video there called Leave Me Alone. Now, back in California, where my ranch is, there's a big festival every day. And some kids weren't rich enough to at least go to it once a month. So I told them they could come to Neverland Ranch for free. And it was so much fun for them. They got to hang out with my little kids. And people thought it was disgraceful mixing rich and poor, but I thought it was just bringing the community more together. Now, before I go and take your questions, if you see Michael Jordan, tell him I want a one-on-one rematch. Thank you for your time.
June 28, 1778. The disorganized 1st Division of the U.S. Continental Army was under the command of General George Washington, and we were losing. The 100-degree heat and dire circumstance made his decision here vital to the survival of the Army. I argued that we should stop the retreat started by General Charles Lee and launch a counterattack against the British General Henry Clinton. A win here at Monmouth Courthouse could help the Americans immensely. Here, in Washington, D.C., you know me as Marquis de Lafayette, the French officer who helped General George Washington win the Revolutionary War. but I want to prove to you how in doing so, I gained glory and honor. The first time I sought glory was at the age of 8 in 1765, when I first heard of the beast of Gévaudan. This horrific, hyena-like creature terrorized citizens all over France, particularly in and around the area of Gévaudan. Hundreds of people in southern France had their throats ripped out by the creature. I longed to be the one who found and killed the beast. Every walk I took, I eagerly wished I could meet the beast. This desire followed me everywhere for 2 years, until it was set up and shot by a hunter with a silver bullet. However, this did not end my quest for glory. I sought it again in 1773 by securing the title of lieutenant in the French military. However, when the new Minister of War implemented military reforms, I was removed from my high-ranked position. Seeing no other path to glory, I set sail for America in 1777. Upon reaching America, I approached the Continental Congress in Philadelphia. I argued that I should be given the chance to fight for the American freedom. Even though they had too many French officers, a supportive letter from Benjamin Franklin and my wealth persuaded Congress to put me under the command of General George Washington. Over the next 2 years, I proved to him not only my commitment to the American cause, but also my expertise in the military. He began to follow my decisions and listen to my advice. On the morning of June 28, 1778, Washington ordered General Charles Lee to lead the 1st Division of the Continental Army in attacking the rear of British General Henry Clinton's forces. All was going according to plan until General Cornwallis arrived to reinforce the British. Even though success was still likely, Lee retreated. When Washington received news of Lee's retreat, he angrily dismissed him and took command of the army. Now he had a decision to make. Should he continue the retreat that Lee had started, or launch a counterattack against the British? I argued that we had to fight here. We had to beat the British. But Lee still agreed with his decision to retreat. Finally, Washington made up his mind. When we can win, we must fight. Prepare the men to battle. And ready the artillery to fire. All day and all night, we barraged them with cannon fire. By morning, they were gone and had retreated to New York. Even though the casualty numbers were the same on both sides, I consider this a win because we held our ground and forced them to retreat. Over the next 3 years, I continued to help the American Revolution. In 1781, I was given 1,200 troops in Virginia. General Cornwallis chased me all over the state, but he never once caught me. Finally, he gave up and set up camp in Yorktown, Virginia, along Chesapeake Bay. Seeing an opportunity, Washington ordered the French Navy to seize control of Chesapeake Bay and ordered me to approach Yorktown from the south. Washington then trapped him from the north. On October 9th, we surrounded General Cornwallis and began an 8-day battle that would end the Revolutionary War. On October 14th, Alexander Hamilton and I stormed the last British redoubt, virtually ending the war. The British were able to last a couple more days, but finally surrendered on October 17th, 1781. We won. While I wanted to continue to help the American cause and finish off the British regiments in America, Washington argued that I would be more supportive to the American cause in France. And so, I returned home. Once home, I continued to help the newly formed United States of America, but I also helped my own people. I worked to improve the lives of lower and middle class citizens. But I openly supported the aristocratic monarchy. However, whereas some Republican revolutionists did not think that I was doing enough, and they wanted the king removed entirely. Before things got worse, I left France for Austria in 1791, and none too soon, because the following year both the king and queen of France were beheaded. I was only able to return to France in 1798, when Napoleon Bonaparte gained control. It was then that I sat down for a quieter life. I was only able to return to my political career 10 years ago, in 1814. Since then, it was then that I joined the Chamber of Deputies. Last year, when I was removed from the Chamber of Deputies and invited to come tour America, I began planning my tour, and that leads me to now. I'd like to close by saying, when you gain glory and honor, you leave a lasting impression on the world.
I always did really like space ever since I was little. I can still remember. It was July 20th, 1969, when the Eagle landed on the moon. It was so exciting watching Neil Armstrong come down the ladder and be the first person to step on the moon. My name is Sally Ride. You know, I was always athletic. I loved tennis for a while. I thought I was going to be a tennis professional. I even received a tennis scholarship to attend Stanford University. But after seeing Neil Armstrong, that's when I decided to study astrophysics. It was very difficult to get my degree. Times are changing, and NASA is beginning to accept women into their astronaut training program. There are 8,000 people that applied for only a few positions, and I was chosen out of the 8,000 people. I learned what it was like to be weightless. That felt really astonishing. Some other things I had to train for were parachute jumping and water survival. I did really love all the training. My role was going to be very important. I was going to be a mission specialist, which means I was going to take control of the robotic arm that releases satellites into space. Before the takeoff, I attended a press conference. Because I was a woman, I was asked the most ridiculous questions, like, what kind of makeup are you taking out? And would you cry if there was a malfunction? Of course I was too well trained to worry about such silly things. On the day of the takeoff, I was anxious as well as shocked that I was actually going up into space. After completing the mission, I continued to work at NASA for many more years. Saturday, on January 27th, the Challenger was scheduled to go up into space one more time. After only 75 seconds, there was a terrible accident killing all 7 astronauts. I was a part of the team put out to investigate what caused the terrible accident. After long hard days, we figured out it was a crack in the O-ring. After that, right now, I'm working on a new thing called Sally Ride Science, which is a program to motivate boys and girls, mostly girls, to not be afraid to try new things. I am Sally Ride, the first American woman in space.
My name is Jack Lewis. I am here because I have been asked by the British Broadcast Company to give a series of radio talks about the natures of Christianity. I am no clergyman. I have no spiritual authority. In fact, I am a former atheist. But as a former atheist, I am well acquainted with the subjects of faith and doubt. Further, I believe that there has never been a more important time to talk about these things and the natures of the Christian faith. We are in the midst of the most horrific war human history has ever seen. It originates from the belief of no moral law or law of nature. It is perpetrated by people who no longer believe in right or wrong. Without any proper credentials, you perhaps would like to know something of my own story. I was born on the 29th day of November, 1898 in Belfast, Ireland. I had a rather unremarkable childhood. I grew up in the church, but abandoned any pretense of faith as a teenager. Further, I found the services boring. Though in 1915, I began studies at Oxford University. I loved university life. But that life was quickly shut down due to the start of the First Great War. As all young men were in that day, I was called upon by war. And as all young men are now, I was greatly changed by war. War creates no absolutely new situation. It simply aggravates the permanent human situation to where we can no longer ignore it. Human life has always been lived on the edge of a precipice. I learned that for the first time when I was wounded. When I recovered, I returned to Oxford, completed my degrees, and accepted a position teaching English at Magdalen College. During those years, I spent a great deal of time with two chaps named Ronald Tolkien and Hugo Dyson. You perhaps heard of Ronald. He recently published a work of fiction under the name of J.R.R. Tolkien. Through the patient and persistent conversation of Ronald and Hugo, I became a theist. You must picture me, alone in that room, Magdalen College, night after night, feeling, whenever my mind lifted even for a second from my work, the steady, unrelenting approach of whom I so earnestly desired not to meet. That which I had greatly feared had at last come upon me. In the Trinity term of 1929, I gave in and admitted that God was God. And I crept down and knelt and prayed. That night, perhaps the most dejected and reluctant convert in all of England. I didn't truly convert, if you will, for another 2 years. The date was September 25th, 1931, and I was in the motorcycle sidecar of my brother's. When we set off to the zoo, I did not believe that Jesus was the Son of God, but when we reached the zoo, I did. No one should infer anything about my brother's skill with a motorcycle. But I do believe, somewhere on that ride, I was awakened. I was awakened to humanity, and the brokenness of humanity. I was awakened to love and a God of love. It takes courage to live in this society of mortals. I recently published a piece called Screwtape Letters. It is about a demon named Screwtape, teaching an adolescent demon named Wormwood on how to become a proper demon. Their boss, of course, is the devil. At one point in the book, Screwtape writes this: "Courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point," which means at the point of highest reality. A chastity or honesty is only chaste or honest on conditions. Pilate was merciful until it became risky. And the riskiest thing in this world is to love. To love takes courage. Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure in keeping your heart intact, you must give it to no one. Lock it up in a casket or coffin, in dark, safe, airless. But in that dark, safe, airless, motionless coffin, it will change. It will become unbreakable, irredeemable, and impenetrable. This is what has happened in Nazi Germany. Hearts have become unbreakable, irredeemable, and impenetrable. And I'm afraid it is happening in Britain as well. We are losing the courage to love and to be loved by others. Because to be loved by God, not merely pity, but delighted in, as an artist delights in his work, or a father and a son. It is something that our thoughts can hardly sustain, but so it is. I do believe what I was truly awakened by is the love of God, the weight of glory that flows from faith. Because to have faith in Christ doesn't mean trying to do all that he says. There would be no sense in saying you trusted a person if you would not take his advice. Thus, in another sense, not trying to do all that he says. Not trying to get to heaven as a reward for your actions, but simply acting in a certain way because the first faint gleam of heaven is already inside you. Though before, I do not know what will happen next in my life. Though I would like to write something that would encourage the next generation of faith. I'm picturing 4 children stepping into the land of talking animals, evil witches, dwarves, and a lion named Aslan. A good and loving lion that can be called upon when the forces of evil seem unstoppable, but also a lion for whom you must be careful, or you could destroy the entire earth in a single grab. Before I begin my broadcast, I should like to say one last thing, the very thing I should like to communicate most to my radio audience. We are humans. We may do wonderful things, but at the end of it all, we are just sinners. The only way to truly know God is to come to him and say, you must do this. I cannot. God bless you.
Good afternoon. Mwah! Does anyone know what that means in gorilla speak? It means I am very glad to be here. My name is Diane Fossey. I have lived for the past 17 years in a cabin nestled in the mountainous jungle of Rwanda, Africa, studying the great apes. Why, you may ask? Well, I had this great urge, this need to go to Africa since the day I was born here, which was January 16, 1932, in San Francisco, California. But not until 1966, when I was 34 years old, did I finally board a plane to a new life in Rwanda. I have never looked back, as this is my calling to protect my family, is what the gorillas have become to me. My childhood was lonely, especially when my mother remarried when I was 5 years old. My mother and my stepfather ignored me most of the time, so I turned to my pets for friendship. My first pet was a goldfish. I became an accomplished equestrian in my teens and loved horses. I worked for 11 years as an occupational therapist, helping children with polio. And when a coworker came back from Africa and told me about it, I thought, I have to go there. When I first laid eyes on the mountain gorillas, I was struck by their physical magnificence, their jet black color against the shimmery emerald green forest. Their large, expressive eyes peered through their leathery faces. They just fascinated me. I met Louis Leakey, an anthropologist, and he asked me to head the study of the great apes. So when funding became available, I packed 4 cameras, countless rolls of film, a 3-year supply of clothes, boarded a plane, and never considered the United States home again. How could I get to know the mountain gorillas? They eat and travel in groups and run from strangers. I had to get them used to me. So I would sit for hours, hidden in the bushes, imitating them by acting like I was picking bugs out of my hair and eating their favorite plants by smacking my lips loudly. My method of studying the mountain gorillas is very unscientific, but it works. I have even learned to communicate with them by doing different vocal sounds. I'm accepted into their world, and sometimes the gorillas will come within a few feet of me. One of the most greatest moments of my life is when a silverback and I touched hands. The gorillas are very gentle creatures unless they feel threatened. I currently observe 51 great apes living in 4 family units. Each group is led by a dominant silverback male who takes charge of the family. Gorillas can live up to 30 years and usually die of disease or accident, but humans are their worst enemies, as I have found out. My favorite gorilla, my beloved Digit, was brutally murdered by poachers. His violent death changed me forever and not for the better, I'm afraid. Many gorillas are slaughtered for trophies, and babies are kidnapped to be put in zoos. You know, I started out studying the great apes, but sadly I have become their protector. Their habitats and their very lives are being threatened by poachers, traffickers, land developers, and farmers. I am hated and have a lot of enemies because of my work at Chautauqua. At this time, there are only 200 to 300 mountain gorillas left in the wild that we know of. In 10 years, I believe the mountain gorilla will be completely extinct unless we act. I hope you will read my book, Gorillas in the Mist, and join me on saving these amazing endangered creatures. Are there any questions for me?
I love being a nurse because I love helping people. My mother was also a nurse here in Warsaw Ghetto. Until the Nazis came, I knew what I wanted to do, and that was help rescue Jewish people. The Jewish people in my Polish community are persecuted by the Nazis. The Nazis are taking Jewish families to concentration camps where they are gassed and tortured. Even worse, the kids going on the train thought they were going somewhere better, but then realized it was worse. I would see the train come back with all the kids' shoes, and I knew it did not lead to something better. I have rescued Jews from all over and provided them with false identity documents, shelter with Polish families, or other care orphanages. Seeing the kids lined up on the streets, begging for food, starving, tortured by soldiers or police, I couldn't bear watch innocent children screaming for their lives. So I helped by starting with my first Jewish child named Anna. The first time I saw her, she was on the streets with her brother. The second time I saw her, her brother had died. He died of starvation. So I went up to her and I asked her, "Would you like to go to someplace better?" She agreed to come with me, so I brought her to a kind Polish family. I still knew I had to do more, so I stacked babies in boxes, and I didn't want people to know I had a Jewish child, so I had a dog in the truck that would bark over the baby's cries. Parents and children were so sad when they were separated, so I kept track of their name and where they were going so I could reunite them with their families after World War II. Also, when I rescued Jewish children, they had to know the Catholic religion, so if police ever caught them, they would ask about the religion. I taught them the Holy Cross, the Son and the Holy Spirit. More and more Jews were getting sent to concentration camps, and 92,000 Jews died in Warsaw Ghetto just from starvation. There were these huge camps with a bunch of bodyguards, so it wasn't easy to sneak in or out. So since I was a nurse, I would ask the bodyguards, may I take a group of Jewish children to the hospital to check if they have this deadly sickness, typhus. They allowed me to take them because they didn't want the sickness passing around or they didn't want to get it. Soon enough, soldiers caught on to my plan. They wanted me to reveal the name of my associates. I would not give up the names. So the chief soldier ordered, "Break her legs." So I was laying on the ground, begging them to stop, but they hit and beat me with the bat. After that, they brought me to a cell with a bunch of other women that had been beaten too. Each of us had our own executioner and knew the doomed day was soon to come. With one single shot, my fate, my story, and my purpose almost came to an end. The others were not as lucky as I, but Zagoda members bribed my executioner with lots of money to let me free. After that, I still had to stay hidden, but by the end of World War II, me and my colleagues rescued about 2,500 Jewish children. Now before I go, I was taught that when someone is drowning, you don't ask if they can swim. You just jump in and help. Any questions?
You may not recognize my name, but I bet you're very familiar with my most famous invention, the chocolate chip cookie. Those chocolate chip cookies, I'll never live them down, and I must say, they've given me a very interesting life. They are invented quite on accident. One day, I was cooking in my inn, and I went up to grab cocoa powder, but when I opened it and tried to pour it in, there was nothing in it. So I decided to put pieces of Nestle semi-sweet chocolate chips in the batter instead, and I expected it to melt and make chocolate cookies. But when I took them out of the oven, they weren't what I was expecting. They were this different kind of cookie. They had these brown pieces of chocolate in the middle, and they were not what I wanted. I wanted chocolate cookies. I called my creations Toll House Crunch Cookies because they're made for an inn called Toll House Inn. It was located halfway between Boston and New Bedford, where early travelers had paid road tolls, changed horses, and stopped at home-cooked meals. Keith and I bought the lodge in 1930 and worked hard to make it a warm and successful place that offered great food. The restaurant was quite successful. We had some famous clients, most notably Mr. John Kennedy, the state senator from Massachusetts at the time, and later became our country's 35th president. I was well known for my lobster dinners as well as my desserts. The popularity of my cookie grew during the war when families sent their fellow soldiers in Europe Toll House cookie care packages. These men wrote home telling their families how much they loved the cookies
and soon I was overwhelmed from all over the world asking for my recipe. I solved this problem by making a deal with Nestle Company to let them put my recipe on the back of their chocolate chips for $1 and a lifetime supply of chocolate chips. I call that one sweet deal. My first cookbook that included the Toll House Crunch cookie was made in 1938, but it went through many printings that did not have it in it. So now you have several ways you could find my recipe, either on the back of a Toll House chocolate chip bag or by reading my latest cookbook edition. And I would also like to invite you, if you're ever in Massachusetts, to come stop by my inn, and I would love to cook you one of my meals. Remember, all you need is love, but a little chocolate now and then doesn't hurt. Does anybody have questions?
Hello, my name is Emily Griffith, and to understand me, you simply need to hear my motto, for all who wish to learn. My life has been dedicated to teaching everyone, not just children, but people of all ages. There are many different types of people who go to my school, including poor people, immigrants who speak different languages, and adults who can't read, and women who struggle to raise their children. The reason why I chose to live in this growing city of Denver, Colorado is because I believe I can make a difference in the people's lives who live here. I am a strong woman, and I do not believe in failure. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, soon after the evils of slavery were ended in our country. When I was growing up, my family was pretty poor, but my dad was a lawyer, but he was very kind-hearted and would not take a case unless he thought his client was innocent. After a few years, he decided to become a missionary for our church. But this eventually made us even poorer. My siblings include my older brother Charles and my two younger sisters, Florence and Ellen. I loved going to school when I was growing up, but often my school work was disrupted from the work I had to do at home. But this did not stop me from reading and learning everything I could. Then my family decided to move to Nebraska to become farmers, but my family was struggling with health issues at the time and could not do work. On top of this, my younger sister Florence, who had developed epilepsy, who had struggled with mental illness all of her life, developed epilepsy and needed expensive doctor visits. And my father thought Charles and I should get some jobs. And Charles decided to work at a post office, while I decided to become a teacher. Before they had hired me, they had me do many tests, including spelling, writing, and reading. First, they had me spell vicissitudes. After I spelled vicissitudes correctly, they wanted to see me write nicely. So I wrote, "I would very much like to teach in your school." One of the men did not like my S, so I wrote a different S, and the man liked this S. And after many other tests, they ended up hiring me. I worked in a one-room schoolhouse, and the children sat on hard benches. The school did not have playgrounds, gyms, or cafeterias as we do today. When a late freeze killed my father's crops, my family decided to move to Denver. When I was putting in my new teaching application, I decided to put my age as 16 because I knew they would not hire an unmarried 27-year-old woman. I had several marriage proposals by this time, but I had always turned them down because I did not want a husband to distract me from my family or my work. My most serious suitor was a man named Fortis Cleves. After we courted a while, he asked to marry me. I said yes, but soon I had second thoughts. He did not want me to work, and he told me I would not be able to take care of Florence. Who would have taken care of Florence's illness if I didn't do it? After a few years of being a teacher and eventually an assistant state superintendent, I was finally able to open the school of my dreams. I called the school the Opportunity School as it offered free classes for people of all ages. One day a boy fainted from hunger, and so I started bringing a cauldron of soup with me every day. And I would feed over 200 people from it. The school has become widely successful and I'm quite proud of it. Now I hope why you understand what my motto is for all who wish to learn. I have devoted my life through learning and my love of learning and sharing my love of learning with others. Does anyone have any questions?
Everybody's a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. This means that if you try to make the impossible, it will be a waste of time. But having a big imagination can lead to big things. I was born 14 years after the American Civil War. But I was not born here in America. I was born in Germany. When I was young, I was very slow to speak. I hardly spoke till I was 3. My mother said that she had a present for me, and I thought it was some new mechanical toy or something. But when she showed me my sister, Maya, I asked her, "Where are the wheels?" When I was about 5, I was ill in bed, and my dad gave me a pocket compass. And I remember turning that compass around, knowing that the needle would always face north. And I would try to turn that needle some other direction. And I was trying to wonder what invisible force is pulling that needle. That's when I started thinking about how things work. When I was in school, my teachers were really critical, and they told my parents I would not amount to much. Fortunately, my parents didn't listen, and it seemed to me like I didn't have any use of teachers anyways. The best learning I got was about me teaching myself. Throughout my scientific career, I've always been a pacifist, seeking to unlock the secrets of the universe for the good of humankind. Though I know these scientific discoveries, and if they found in the wrong hands, then it will lead to irreversible damage to our world. To this note, I'd like to speak about my dear colleague, Hungarian physicist Leo Szilard. We met in Berlin in the early 1920s, and together we made the Einstein-Szilard refrigerator. In the early 1930s, he and I had to leave Germany because Hitler was rising into power, and both of us were Jews. That's where Szilard figured out that the neutron-driven fission of heavy atoms could be used to create a nuclear chain, powerful enough to make atomic bombs. So he quickly became concerned that German scientists could be conducting similar experiments. So on July 12, 1939, he and another scientist, Eugene Wigner, drove to Long Island, New York, where I was staying, to explain to me about the dangers of an atomic bomb. I didn't even think about that. So they drafted a letter to Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning him about the dangers of an atomic bomb, and I signed it, which ultimately led to the birth of the Manhattan Project. This is one of the moments that really deeply saddens me, knowing that many lives were lost. I can only justify my signature because of the greater danger that Nazi Germany would have developed the bomb first. Does anyone have any questions about me or my life?
that little by little I'll be able to solve my own problems and survive. Let's start from the beginning. My name is Frida Kahlo, born July 6, 1907 in Cayo, Mexico. I grew up in a family home known as the Blue House or Casa Azul. My father is German and my mother was Spanish and Indian. I was very close to my father. I have 2 older sisters and 1 younger. I was very sickly as a child. I had polio at age 6 and was bedridden for 9 months. This caused my right leg to grow much thinner than my left. I limped and wore long skirts to cover it for the rest of my life. Despite my leg issues, I still did sports. I was a swimmer, played soccer, and even wrestled, which was a neutral program at my time. I attended a national preparatory school in Mexico City in 1922 with the hope of becoming a doctor. There were only 35 females enrolled in the student body of 2,000. I discovered political activists, artists, and communists at this school. This is also where I met my future husband, Diego Rivera. Charlie, you know his paintings. Before I fell in love with my husband, I was in love with another man, Alejandro Arias Gomez. We were involved in a serious trolley accident when a trolley and streetcar collided. I was seriously injured. My spine and my pelvis were fractured and a steel bar ripped in my hip. I had to wear a full body cast for 3 months. But to kill time and alleviate pain, I started painting self-portraits, because that's the subject I do best. In 1928, I reconnected with Diego and asked him to evaluate some more paintings. But we ended up falling in love and getting married a year later. He was 20 years older than me, and my mother did not approve. But I still traveled a lot with Diego and his art. We went to the United States for a little bit. We lived in New York, Philadelphia, and Detroit before moving back to Mexico City. When we moved back to Mexico City, Diego and I had a rough marriage. He had an affair with my younger sister, Christina. In 1939, I left to Paris. Diego and I divorced and I left to Paris to show some of my art. I met another famous painter, Pablo Picasso, while in Paris. In 1940, I returned to Mexico and Diego and I were remarried. In 1941, I lost my father and became depressed. Despite my travels and art showings, I still suffer from much pain and chronic health problems. In 1950, I was diagnosed with gangrene in my right foot. I endured many surgeries, but I still stayed painting during my hospital stays. I even showed up to my exhibition by ambulance and welcomed my guests. A few months later, my right was amputated to stop the gangrene from spreading. So, as you can see, my life is very hard. But I don't paint dreams or nightmares, just my own reality. Any questions?
Our hearts aching, our prayers praying, our flags waving, never forget. I was born on January 1st, 1752, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My parents' names were Samuel and Rebecca Griscom. I was the 8th child of 17 children. In a household of 17, only 9 survived childhood. I had 2 siblings die before I was even born. I lost 2 sisters at age 5 and 1 at the young age of 2. I lost 2 brothers at age 3. If that wasn't bad enough, I had a twin brother and sister die of smallpox. As a young girl, I learned to sew from my great aunt Sarah Elizabeth. I also attended a Quaker Ran school. When I wasn't at school, I continued to learn a lot of skills from my family. When my schooling was finished, my father apprenticed me to an upholsterer named William Webster. While working there, I fell in love with my fellow apprentice, John Ross. John and I eloped in 1773 in Gloucester City, New Jersey. Our marriage caused me to split from my family and my expulsion from the Quaker congregation. We had only been married for 2 years when the American Revolutionary War broke out. Sadly, my husband was killed in a gunpowder explosion. A year went by, and I soon married my second husband, Joseph Ashford. He was a
Our wedding day was June 15th, 1777. Together we had 2 daughters, Zilla, who died at 9 months of age, and Eliza. Again, I married her short because Joseph died at the Old prison, a British jail after his ship was captured. My third and final husband was John Claypool. We were married in May of 1783. Together we had 5 additional daughters, Clarissa, Susanna, Jane, Rachel, and Harriet. Sadly, Harriet didn't survive. We had been married for a happy 34 years when he died of poor health in 1817. I never remarried. Now, most of you are probably wondering, what am I famous for? Well, I'll tell you just like I told my children and grandchildren. One day in late May of 1776, George Washington came to me and asked me to sew the first American flag. I knew George and Martha because I sat next to them at church. I also embroidered ruffles on his shirt bosoms and cuffs. That was just the beginning of our friendship. It only took me a few short months to finish the flag. This beautiful flag had 13 alternating red and white stripes and a field blue with 13 white stars. It was adopted as the national flag on June 14, 1777. So I guess you could say I helped the world be a better place when I sewed the first American flag. This gave us Americans a way to identify America. I thank George Washington for my success. Any questions?
The year was 1916. I opened my doors to my school. I was so excited. I only thought about 200 people would come, but I was wrong, so wrong. Over 1,400 people came. On the first day, I only thought about 1% would sign up for writing, or typewriting, but over 100 people learned. I only had one typewriter at the time, so I had to go find more. Or later in the year, one of my students fainted from exhaustion of hunger, because no one had breaks, no lunch breaks, no nothing. So I asked my mom and my sister brought big pots of soup on the trolleys all the way to my school. Later that year, I always wore my students' hats to give them credit so they could learn, so business could hire them, so they know. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the way beginning. I was born on February 10, 1864, in Cincinnati, Ohio. I was born of a family of 5. My dad, my mom, my older brother, my 2 younger sisters. My little sister couldn't learn as fast as everybody else, so I had to help her. I really liked teaching her all new stuff, because she looked so excited when she learned. Later, my dad took me to my uncle's boat shop. There I saw a sign, for all who wish to learn. That got me thinking, that would be such a great thing to help. So everyone could learn how to learn, everyone could learn how to read and write. Later that year, later in life, we moved. My father was a lawyer. We moved house to house because he only took cases he believed in, so we never had a lot of money. My education kept getting interrupted. Later, my dad moved to Nebraska to become a homesteader. If you don't know what that is, it's someone who works on a farm for 5 years to be able to own it. But we never made a lot of money growing the crops. So my dad became a Joseph of Peace, still not enough money to have me and my brother work. My brother worked at the post office as a mail boy. I worked as a teacher because I loved teaching, and there was not a lot of opportunities for kids. There, I went into an interview. 3 men. They had me write, read, do math, all this simple stuff. Some sewing, some hat making, just to make sure they know I could do everything. But they really thought I was too pretty, too young, not smart enough to actually work. But I proved them wrong. I wrote on the board, I really hope I can work in your school. That's how you write your S's? I changed it. I changed the way I wrote my S, just to please him. I got the job. I worked in a sod schoolhouse. Later that year, the schoolhouse got upgraded into a nice wooden one. Then, late that year, a tornado came. I was in middle class. I posted everyone on the chalkboard that was in the middle of class. The tornado took all the walls, but no matter what, the kids were still safe. I was happy for the kids. Later, during the late frost, it killed all our plants, so my dad said, let's move the city.
let's make a city life. There, I worked in a demo school. There, we worked on the poor side of school. So not a lot of children went to school. They helped their mothers and fathers work on the farms. Most of the people didn't know English. They knew Spanish, Swedish, German. So I decided, let me open my own night school so they can learn and do whatever. There, it's got me thinking, what happens if I made my own school for everyone to learn? There, I went to the house of the umbrella schools so I could get funding for my new school. There, they said it would have been stupid. I told my newspaper friend, and he wrote the story. Everyone said it was going to be crazy. It's a stupid idea. Why would you make a free school and not get any money out of it? But I did it. They lent me funding. There, I had 5 other friends. Us 5 worked in the school. Later, I kept getting teachers through my connections through the school. Oh, but that's where my story ends right now. But I really hope more kids will come, more opportunities are learned. Any questions?
Hello all, and when I say all, I mean it. Women, men, children, whites, blacks, gays, and Asians alike. Everyone in the world is welcome to come before my humble personage and listen to God speak through me. My name is Martin Luther King Jr., and today I want to tell you a little story about a pastor from down south in Atlanta, Georgia. As I said, it started in Atlanta, Georgia on January 15, 1929. I was born of 2 loving parents, Martin Luther King Sr. and Alberta Williams King. My mother was a teacher, and my father was a servant of the Lord Almighty. That is what led to one of my many occupations as an adult, those being a pastor, a humanitarian, an author, a civil rights activist, and a public speaker. I had 1 brother and 1 sister, their names being A.D. King and Christine King Ferris. Sadly, only my sister is alive today. My brother and the youngest member of our family passed. In the year of 1953, I married Coretta Scott in Marion, Alabama. We bore 4 children, their names being Dexter, Yolanda, Bernice, and Martin Luther King III. But now enough facts about my kinship, and let's move on to anecdotes of my career. In the year of 1955, I received my PhD in systematic theology from Boston University. That same year, a group of my companions and I banded together to march for freedom and equality. We called our little initiative the Civil Rights Movement. One of my many responsibilities during the movement was to lead a boycott of the public transportation systems in Montgomery, Alabama. The boycott started on December 5th, 1955, and lasted for more than a year. For that 1 year, those with dark skin did not ride those buses, and those who did, like Rosa Parks, did not give up their civil rights and their seats to the whites that tried to take them. On December 20th, 1956, the boycott ended and laws were passed to lessen Jim Crow and segregation on the public transportation systems. I must not forget one of my favorite pieces of writing ever, the letter from a Birmingham jail. While peacefully protesting, my companions and I were apprehended by the police force. While sitting uncomfortably in jail, I began to format my letter. The letter discussed how all we were doing was fighting with our words to see a brighter future, and how everyone in the world had a right to break unjust laws for the better good of the public. Lastly, I will now discuss something I'm sure all of the audience has heard of, the I Have a Dream speech. This speech was the turning point in our march. If I simply misspoke a little or mumbled a bit, the foundation of our march would crumble, and our posterity and the Negroes of this time would suffer. Oh, wow. I must be going. The fact that I'm receiving the Nobel Peace Prize today has completely slipped my mind, but I do believe I have a little bit of time before I'm extremely late. The documents informing me I was receiving the Nobel Peace Prize said that I was receiving them for my steadfast commitment to racial equality and my outstanding leadership in the civil rights movement. The documents told me that I was meant for bigger things than just fighting for civil rights. Mind you, this was no small task, but it was still telling me that I was meant for even greater things. Oh, I must now be going. Are there any questions before I depart?
When I was 13 years old, I had a vision. In that vision, God sent an angel with a message. He wanted me to help save France. You see, my beloved country is at war. The British king wants to become king of France because our king had left the throne. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Jeanne d'Arc. Some people call me Joan of Arc because it's easy to pronounce. I was born a peasant in Montgomery, France, on January 6, 1412, to Jacques Dac and Isabelle Romy. The war taking place at the time of my birth had begun in 1337, 76 years before to my vision. I saw a glowing light. At first, I didn't know what was going on. It scared me, but then I saw an angel, and he told me I needed to see France. I knew it was my destiny to go, so I had no choice. He also told me that there was a sword buried in a church I could use. It wouldn't be very helpful to wear a dress, so boys' armor would suit me for battle, even though it wasn't allowed for a girl to wear boys' armor. I did it anyways. Now I just needed to get into battle, which was no easy task. I can't just walk in to the battle and just say I'm joining the battle, mostly because I'm a girl. Once I finally found someone who was guarding the town. I asked him if he could take me to the king. He said no, but with the help of my brothers, we begged, and finally he would let us into battle and he would take us to the king. And on our way to the castle, I had to stop at a church. The angel said that the sword would be buried in the church, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I looked and looked and looked everywhere, but I finally found it buried. It was covered in dirt and rust though, and I didn't really want to take it. But God says I must, so I did. With one tap, all the dirt and rust fell off of the sword. How? I was very confused. Once I was finally at the castle, I had to tell the king my story. He knew I was meant to. We both did. I am not afraid. I was born to do this. I got on my horse and I left for battle. Every day the battle was long and hard. I helped fight for France's freedom every day. One day I saw a group of people praying and crying. I wondered why so I went over. They were praying and crying because the baby was just born and it wouldn't wake up. So I prayed with them, and suddenly the baby's eyes blinked open. Everyone thinks I have some sort of power that I can do things I hope happen. But it's just a coincidence things are happening, I hope happen. I saw a warrior coming towards me, and I knew he might capture me. I got my flag, waved it high and proud, and got my shield. But he grabbed me, and I dangled off my horse, dragging on the ground. The British have captured me, and I know it's over. The fine to get me out is far too pricey for France to pay. When the British asked me if I was in the grace of God, I didn't want to say, yes, I am. Nor I wasn't. So I said, if I am not, may God so place me there. If I am, may God so keep me.
There I was, standing on stage about to win the Nobel Peace Prize. The first woman to win such an honor. Hi, my name is Jane Adams, and today I'm here to teach you about how I led up to winning the Nobel Peace Prize. So, I was born September 6, 1860, and I was born adventurous. When we were little, me and my brother would sneak out. Once I lowered him over a ledge to spy on a baby owl. I loved to read. I guess it's because I would get trapped in the books, because books are full of adventures. Girls didn't go to college much in 1881, but my father believed I could, and so I did, and I graduated at the top of my class. After college, I didn't know what to do with my life. That same summer, my father died. About 2 years later, me and my friends went to London, and we saw so many beautiful things. But then I saw something I would never forget. I saw people begging for the market's leftover rotten fruit. There was a lot of unemployment and poverty in London and in the United States as well. A few years later, I told my friend Ellen Gay Starr what I had planned to do. I would make a settlement home kind of like the ones I saw in London. In Chicago, there's the nice sides with the nice lakes, the fancy shops, and mansions. But then there's also the not so nice sides. A lot of people there are immigrants, a lot not coming with money.
A lot of them don't speak English, which makes it hard to find good jobs. I found the perfect house. It was right in the middle of the worst streets. Garbage piles up high, large families in tiny houses with no running water. Rough kids were stirring up trouble because they had nothing to do. And it smelled really bad. The house was owned by Charles J. Hall, but he handed it down to a cousin, Helen Culver. At first, I was paying rent, but then, when I told Helen what I had planned to do, she gave me the house for free. I was so thankful, that's why I named it Whole House. Now, the first night I was so busy and excited that I forgot to lock a side door. Surprisingly, no one broke in. And that's when I decided to leave my house unlocked, so people could know they could come in. So people that didn't have anything would know that they could come to Whole House. Now, it wasn't always peaceful. Once some boys were throwing rocks at the house and broke a window. Then I knew I needed to give something for the kids to do. They were about to tear down a nearby park, but I told them they should keep it up. So I bought the park. Another time was a man broke into the house. I let him to the door so he wouldn't hurt himself climbing out a window. When he broke in a second time, I asked him why. He said he had lost his job and had no money. I told him to come back the next morning, and when he did, I gave him a job. People said I had my own way of seeing things. I didn't want to be paid for working there. And I paid my own money for working there. Even clothes I would hand down. And my friends would tease me about this. Once they gave me a pair of undergarments with my initials on them, and I still passed them down. So that's my life, and that's Whole House. So I hope you liked what I said, and what I did, and what I do. Any questions?
I'm the second oldest of 8 children. I am sick with pneumonia, asthma, and scarlet fever. Because of that, I missed a lot of days at school. During that time, I read. That's where I got a good portion of my education. I was a poor student in school. I was very smart, though. One day, I was going to be expelled. My father begged the principal not to. Instead, they had me talk with the counselor. She asked me, "Why don't you work hard? I know you're smarter, you just don't work for it." And I simply answered, "Why should I? My brother's so smart, he does the work for me." That got a kick out of everyone. Thinking about it now, probably shouldn't have said that. After that, I ended up going into the Navy. In the Navy, I was a PT boat commander. One night, my ship was sailing, and it got hit. It split in two. I ended up tying my belt around one of the sailors and swimming for 5 hours to land. I ended up getting a back problem for that. After that, my brother was supposed to go into politics, but sadly he had died. So I went into them. I ended up being a senator for 6 years, and then I was the representative for 7. Those were some of the best years of my life, and they made me the man that I am today. After that, I ran for president. I was very happy when I won. I feel that one of my best accomplishments was the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I'm going to share that with you. One day on Cuba, a missile site was suddenly activated, and it was dangerous because people could die. So I decided that it was a good idea to talk it out instead of sending the military and the army to fight. Because in my opinion, that would cause more damage and more people would die. And I feel that ever since that day, I believe strongly that the saying, "Words are better than fists," will always be with me. And it's true. I talked it out. I didn't fight it out, I talked it out. And in my heart, I feel that any president, no, not any president, any person would do the same thing for their country. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to have to go now. My driver's waiting to take me to Dallas, but I'm ready and able to take a few questions.
You have to write the book that wants to be written. And if the book will be too challenging for adults, then you write it for children. That is my motto for writing. You may know me as the author of the children's novel A Wrinkle in Time, but you probably have no idea how long it took to find a publisher for that book. I wrote it in 1962, and it was rejected over 30 times. Since that date, the book has gone on to win many awards, including the Newbery Medal, and I have gone on to create a quintet or series of 5 books, including Meg, Calvin, and Charles Wallace as some of the main characters. These adventurous children have been an important part of my life. I led a secluded life as a child, and I felt like I needed a bit of adventure. My mother was a pianist, and my father was an author. During school, my teachers thought I was just stupid. Once I overheard them saying that Madeline is just stupid. Hard words for a child to hear. I lived in my own world of fantasy, reading books and writing in my journal. This is why they didn't think I knew anything. I began my career as an author after I went to college and moved to New York City, where I met and married my husband, Hugh Franklin. It was a romantic courtship. We met in the cherry orchard and were married in the joyous season, 2 of our New York plays. We always thought there was so much to do in the big city, so many plays and concerts to attend to, and so many authors to talk to and learn from. But Hugh and I decided that we had had enough of the big city after our 3 children came along, and we moved to a little farm in Connecticut. Those were the years I will always cherish. We bought and operated our own little country store, and I dedicated myself to my family and writing. I also worked as a choir director at the local congregational church. I made some money as an author over the years, but it was hardly enough to keep me going. On my 40th birthday, when we received the mail, I got a letter. I knew that this would be the one to help me set up my career, but I opened it up, and it was yet another rejection notice. I was determined to give up writing altogether. But even when I tried to, the stories just wouldn't stop rolling around in my head. So, my inspiration came in an unusual way. We had took our family on a cross-country trip and out in the beauty of the mountains, the plains, and the rivers. I felt a story starting to bubble up in my head. It was about some kids who had to stop a danger that threatened to destroy them all. This story became A Wrinkle in Time. Over the years, I have began to notice that A Wrinkle in Time will most likely always be my best-known book. But I still have and still do write many other books for adults and children. Remember that a child will come open to things, while an adult will come close to an open book. Now, I must go meet with another author, but I do think that I have some time for questions.